Imagine sharing your life with someone for 7 years, investing everything you have into a marriage, only to become nothing more than a shadow in your own home. That was my reality. When I finally walked away, I didn't slam the door or make a scene. I simply left, quietly, deliberately, leaving behind an empty house and a farewell note. Days slipped by, then a full week, and not once did my phone light up with a call or a message from her. She hadn't even realized I was gone. But when it finally hit her, it wasn't just the loneliness that set in, it was the weight of everything I took with me. But before I take you deeper into this story, drop a comment below and let me know where you're tuning in from. And if this story grabs your attention, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss what's next. Liam Parker sat at the edge of the living room sofa, his gaze fixed on his wife, Emma Wilson, as she scrolled through her phone, completely absorbed in whatever was on the screen. After 7 years of marriage, Liam felt less like a husband and more like a ghost haunting his own home. He had spent years trying, anticipating her needs, bending over backward to make her happy, longing for even the smallest sign that she still cared. But his efforts went unnoticed, dismissed like background noise in Emma's increasingly self-absorbed world. Emma, once affectionate and full of life, had grown distant and indifferent. The warmth that once defined their relationship had been replaced by cold, detached interactions. Her career, her friends, even the trivial distractions of social media seemed to take precedence over the man she had once vowed to love. Liam found himself trapped in a daily battle, desperately trying to salvage the connection they once had, but the distance between them only grew. Frustration had been simmering beneath the surface for too long, and one evening, Liam finally broke the silence that had settled between them like an immovable wall. He leaned forward, his voice steady but tinged with both hope and exhaustion. "Emma, do you think we should try to fix our marriage?" His eyes searched hers, looking for even the slightest sign that she cared. Without even glancing up from her phone, she let out a dismissive sigh. "Yeah, sure," she muttered. "What for?" "I'm busy." "You do you." The words hit Liam harder than he expected. His chest tightened, his throat went dry. He swallowed hard and pushed forward. "I feel like I don't even exist in this house," he admitted, his voice quieter now, laced with a vulnerability he hoped would break through to her. Emma finally looked up, but only to smirk. "If you don't like it, you can leave," she said flatly, before turning her attention back to her phone. Something inside Liam shifted. Her words weren't just careless, they were deliberate. A final dismissal of him, his feelings, their entire marriage. He had spent years waiting for things to change, hoping for something, anything, to bring them back to what they once were. But in that moment, he realized he was done waiting. This time, when he left, it wouldn't be with lingering hope. It would be for good. And he would make sure she understood exactly what she had lost. Still, Liam wasn't ready to walk away without giving it one last shot. Reluctantly, they agreed to try couples therapy, his suggestion, of course, one last attempt to mend something that already felt irreparable. To him, it was a chance to address the growing chasm between them. To Emma, it was nothing more than an inconvenience, another obligation she had to get through. Their first session took place in the office of Dr. Olivia Harper, a seasoned therapist with a calm, knowing presence. She greeted them warmly, her composed demeanor standing in stark contrast to the heavy tension that followed Liam and Emma into the room. "Let's start with something simple," Dr. Harper said, her voice warm yet firm. "What do you both value most in a marriage?" Liam glanced at Emma, waiting to see if she'd answer first. She didn't. Instead, her gaze drifted to the clock on the wall, as if she were already counting down the minutes. When she finally spoke, her response was void of warmth, her tone clinical. "Stability. I like having someone who pays the bills and keeps the house in order." Liam felt the breath catch in his throat. He wasn't sure what he had expected her to say, but it wasn't that. "That's it?" he asked, unable to mask the disbelief in his voice. Emma shrugged, unbothered. What else is there? Stability is important. Everyone needs it. Liam turned toward Dr. Harper, searching her face for some kind of validation, some reassurance that he wasn't the only one who found this response devastating. So that's what I am to her? A paycheck with a pulse? A live-in handyman? Dr. Harper met Liam's gaze with quiet understanding, silently encouraging him to say more. He exhaled sharply, the weight of it all pressing down on him. I've spent years trying to be a real partner, to love her, support her, give her everything she needs, but she doesn't even see me. I'm just convenient. Before Dr. Harper could respond, Emma cut in, her voice laced with annoyance. Don't put words in my mouth, Liam. I never said you were just a housekeeper. Stability matters, that's all. I like knowing what to expect. Liam shook his head, his frustration mounting. But what about love, Emma? What about connection? Companionship? Don't those things mean anything to you? Emma let out a tired sigh, rolling her eyes. Of course they matter, but you're making this into something it's not. Liam leaned back in his chair, the weight of her words pressing against his chest. She wasn't just dismissing his feelings, she was dismissing the very foundation of their marriage. Dr. Harper, sensing the growing divide between them, leaned forward. Emma, do you understand why Liam feels undervalued? Emma gave another indifferent shrug. I think he's overreacting. He knows I'm not the romantic type. This isn't news. So why are we even here? It's not like there's some huge problem. Liam stared at her, stunned. This wasn't just indifference. It was complete denial. For years, he had carried their marriage on his back, pouring every ounce of effort into fixing problems she refused to acknowledge. And now, under the stark lighting of the therapy office, the truth was impossible to ignore. Emma didn't care. She never had. Dr. Harper turned her attention back to Liam. Hearing that, how does it make you feel? Liam let out a slow breath, thinking carefully before answering. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, but steady. It makes me feel like I've been fooling myself. Like I've spent all this time holding on to something that wasn't even real. I wanted to believe she saw me as her partner, but she doesn't. To her, I'm just a function. And that was it. The turning point. As the conversation unfolded, Liam felt the last traces of hope slipping away. He had come into therapy thinking they could mend what was broken, that maybe, if they worked at it, they could find their way back to each other. But Emma's indifference wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the truth. A truth he could no longer ignore. By the end of the session, Liam no longer felt the urge to fight for their marriage. Instead, he realized he needed to fight for himself. With a heavy but determined heart, he stepped out of the therapy room, leaving Emma behind. She had made her choice, security over love, predictability over connection. And in doing so, she had lost him. For Liam, this wasn't just the end of a session. It was the beginning of his awakening. The tension in therapy only grew thicker as the weeks passed. What had started as a last-ditch effort to mend their marriage quickly turned into an exercise in frustration, especially for Emma. While Liam approached each session with an open heart, hoping to untangle the knots that had formed between them, Emma remained detached. Her disinterest was painfully obvious. She showed up late, barely engaged, her phone never far from her grasp. When she did speak, her responses were clipped, void of emotion. It was becoming clearer with each session, Liam was the only one who had ever been fighting for their marriage. And now, he was finally realizing it was a fight he couldn't win. During what would become their final therapy session, Dr. Olivia Harper posed a question meant to encourage reflection. Emma, what do you think Liam needs from you to feel more connected in this marriage? Emma let out an exaggerated sigh, folding her arms as she leaned back in her chair. "I don't know," she said, her tone laced with irritation. "I'm not a mind reader. If he's got a problem, he should just say it outright instead of dragging me here." Beside her, Liam clenched his fists beneath the table, forcing himself to stay calm. "That's exactly what this is for, Emma, to talk about the problems. But every time I try, you shut me down." Emma rolled her eyes, clearly unmoved by his frustration. "Because there's nothing to fix. You're the one making a big deal out of everything. I'm fine with how things are." Dr. Harper intervened, her voice calm yet firm. "Emma, therapy isn't about placing blame, it's about understanding each other's needs and working toward a solution." But Emma had already checked out. Her posture stiffened, her expression unreadable. "Look," she said, waving a dismissive hand, "this is enough. I don't need someone analyzing me. Liam's the one with the issue, not me." A heavy silence settled over the room. Liam felt the sting of her words, but along with the hurt came a startling sense of clarity. This wasn't just a bad moment, this was Emma. This was how she saw their marriage. Without another word, Emma stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "I don't have time for this," she muttered. "If Liam wants to waste his time here, that's on him. I have better things to do." The sound of the door clicking shut behind her carried more weight than any argument they had ever had. Dr. Harper shot Liam a concerned look, but he remained still, his gaze fixed on the floor. And just like that, the last shred of denial he had been clinging to was gone. Emma wasn't invested in fixing their marriage. Walking away from therapy was easier than acknowledging the cracks in their relationship. For Liam, it was the moment of no return. He finally understood that saving himself meant letting her go. The quiet of the empty therapy room stood in stark contrast to the storm churning inside him. Across from him, Dr. Harper remained patient, giving him the space to process the moment. For weeks, he had sat in these sessions, his words brushed aside, his feelings dismissed. But now, for the first time, he was here alone, able to say what had been weighing on his heart without interruption. And when he finally spoke, the words came out steady, but final. "She doesn't love me," he said, his voice devoid of anger, just truth. "She never did. I was just convenient." Dr. Harper met his gaze with quiet empathy. "That's a painful realization, Liam, but it's also a moment of clarity. What do you want to do next?" A faint, resolute smirk crossed Liam's lips. "I'll leave," he said, the decision ringing through him with a certainty he hadn't felt in years. For the first time, he felt like he was in control. No more chasing after affection, no more twisting himself into someone more palatable, no more waiting for something that would never come. The years of emotional neglect, the nights spent lying awake wondering how to salvage a one-sided marriage, the countless attempts to be seen, it had all led to this moment. And now, he wasn't leaving as a victim. If Emma valued convenience over connection, then she was about to experience what life was like without the comforts she had taken for granted. In the days that followed, Liam carefully mapped out his exit. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming his dignity. Every move was deliberate, grounded in logic, legality, and self-respect. He started with their finances. He had been the primary contributor to their joint account, and he made sure that every transaction was within his legal rights. Quietly, methodically, he transferred his funds into a private account, leaving the joint one nearly empty. One step at a time, he was dismantling the life they had built together. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Because this time, when Liam walked away, he wasn't looking back. Liam smirked bitterly at the thought of Emma realizing, far too late, that the stability she had taken for granted had always depended on the man she had so easily dismissed. With methodical precision, he turned his attention to the household bills. Nearly every account, electricity, water, internet, was registered under his name. One by one, he scheduled their cancellation, ensuring they would be cut off shortly after his departure. Emma had never concerned herself with these responsibilities, and soon enough, she'd be forced to manage them on her own. Next, Liam combed through Emma's laptop and phone records, his gut tightening as he uncovered the truth he had long suspected but never wanted to face. The messages confirmed it all: her affair with Ryan Miller. The words she had exchanged with him stung like a blade, each line slicing away any lingering doubt. Yet, rather than breaking him, the revelation only steeled his resolve. He quietly compiled the evidence, ensuring he had a full record for when the time came to use it. Seeking legal guidance, Liam met with a lawyer to outline his rights and begin the necessary paperwork to protect his share of their assets. Each step he took felt like another weight lifting off his shoulders. For the first time in years, he wasn't reacting to Emma, he was acting for himself. As the plan took shape, he penned a simple yet final message, one that encapsulated everything he had come to understand. Emma, thank you for teaching me a valuable lesson. I deserve more than to be an accessory in someone else's life. Enjoy the stability you cherish. He placed the note on the dining table, a quiet but powerful closing statement to their one-sided marriage. This wasn't an act of spite. It wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a deliberate choice, a testament to his self-worth. He no longer sought Emma's validation or held on to the hope that she might change. That chapter was over. What mattered now was that, for once, she would feel the weight of her actions. As Liam finalized his preparations, an unexpected feeling settled over him: peace. For years, he had been trapped in the shadow of a woman who refused to see his worth. But now? Now, he was stepping into the light, leaving her to face the emptiness she had created. His departure wouldn't just mark the end of their marriage. It would be a statement. The evening air was still, a soft breeze stirring the leaves in the backyard. Liam had just returned home after a long day, his mind running through the final details of his plan. But as he stepped inside, something unusual caught his ear: laughter. Not the distant hum of a TV. Not the clipped tone of a phone call. No, this was different. It was easy, intimate, unmistakably familiar. A sinking feeling settled in his gut as he followed the sound toward the sliding glass door. The glow of the patio lights spilled onto the lawn, illuminating a scene that made his stomach twist. There, lounging comfortably on a deck chair, was Emma. Beside her, sharing a bottle of wine, was none other than Ryan Miller, her so-called gym buddy. Liam froze in the doorway, watching as Emma leaned in toward Ryan, her posture relaxed, her smile unguarded. It was a side of her he hadn't seen in years. And it sure as hell wasn't reserved for him. For a moment, Emma didn't even register his presence. But when she finally looked up, her expression barely changed. Instead of scrambling for an excuse or showing even a flicker of guilt, she simply tilted her head and gestured toward the door. "You're just going to stand there?" she asked, as if he were the intruder in his own home. Liam stepped outside, his chest tight, every muscle in his body coiled with restrained anger. His voice was steady, but the edge was unmistakable. "Gym buddy sipping wine in my backyard, huh?" Emma barely batted an eye. Her casual indifference only fanned the fire burning inside him. "So what?" she said, taking another leisurely sip from her glass. "Don't make a big deal out of it." Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly aware of the tension thickening in the air. "But Emma?" She remained unfazed. Liam scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief. "Not a big deal," he echoed, his voice rising. "You're sitting out here, drinking wine with another man in our backyard, and you don't think that's a big deal?" Emma's gaze remained cold, detached. She set her glass down and met his eyes with the same dismissive nonchalance that had defined their marriage. "You're overreacting," she said. "We're just talking. Maybe you should relax." Liam felt the anger rise, but beneath it, there was something else, something even stronger. Finality. This moment wasn't breaking him. It was confirming everything he already knew. And as he stood there, watching Emma dismiss their marriage with a shrug, he realized one thing for certain: he had made the right decision. Because after tonight, he wasn't just leaving. He was making damn sure she would feel his absence. Liam stared at her, the weight of realization crashing over him like a tidal wave. This wasn't just disrespect, it was outright contempt for their marriage. His gaze shifted to Ryan, whose uneasy posture betrayed his discomfort. The man looked like he wanted to disappear. "And you," Liam said, his tone sharp as a blade, "what exactly are you doing here?" Ryan fumbled for an answer, his voice stumbling over itself. Emma invited me over. Just, to talk about workouts." Liam let out a short, humorless laugh. "Workouts," he repeated, his voice thick with sarcasm. "Right. Because wine pairs perfectly with squats." Emma groaned, rolling her eyes in clear irritation. "Oh, please, Liam. Don't embarrass yourself." And just like that, his anger melted into something colder: clarity. She wasn't flustered. She wasn't ashamed. There wasn't even a flicker of guilt in her voice. No hesitation, no attempt to deny what was obvious. She didn't just think she could get away with this, she believed he wouldn't do anything about it. Liam didn't argue. He didn't yell. He simply turned and walked back into the house, shutting the door behind him with a quiet finality. His hands trembled slightly, but his mind was already spinning. Emma wanted to treat their marriage like a convenience? Fine. She was about to find out exactly what life was like without that convenience. From the other side of the glass door, their laughter resumed, soft, intimate, but to Liam, it may as well have been a knife twisting in his ribs. The sound echoed through the hollow space where his love for her had once lived, but this time, it didn't ignite anger. It solidified his decision. This wasn't just about leaving anymore. Emma had made sure of that. This was about ensuring her betrayal had consequences. Standing alone in the kitchen, his eyes landed on the two half-filled wine glasses on the counter, the remnants of their little rendezvous. He exhaled slowly, the weight of years pressing down on him. But beneath it, something else stirred. Purpose. This wasn't just the end of their marriage. This was the beginning of his revenge. That night, the house felt eerily quiet. The faint hum of the refrigerator was the only sound cutting through the stillness. Liam sat in the dim glow of the living room, his mind replaying every moment of what had happened outside. The laughter, the glances, the way Emma had barely acknowledged him. He needed clarity. Proof. A confirmation of what he already knew but hadn't yet put into words. His eyes drifted toward Emma's laptop, carelessly left on the kitchen counter. He hesitated. A small voice inside reminded him that this wasn't who he was. He wasn't the type to snoop, to invade her privacy. But another part of him, the part hardened by her blatant disregard, pushed forward. If she had nothing to hide, then there was no harm. If she did, then it was time for the truth. Liam crossed the room, his fingers hovering over the trackpad for only a second before he opened the laptop. Her password was second nature to him, her birthday, lazy and predictable, much like the effort she had put into their marriage. The screen unlocked. Her email account was already open, but nothing unusual stood out. He almost closed it, but then he noticed a minimized chat window in the corner. A messaging app. His pulse quickened. One click, and the conversation loaded instantly. At first, it seemed harmless, casual back-and-forth exchanges. But as he scrolled upward, the messages darkened, shifting from playful to intimate. His eyes moved swiftly over the text, each word carving deeper into his chest. Emma, Liam is so predictable. He just nags and nags. I can't take it anymore. Ryan, then why stay? You know I'm here for you. Emma, because he pays the bills, and it's easy. But honestly, Liam bores me to death. You're who I really need. Liam froze. His heart pounded as he read the words again, hoping they would somehow change. But there they were, cold, calculated, and final. She hadn't just betrayed him physically. She had reduced him to nothing more than a financial cushion. A placeholder. A means to an end. The betrayal wasn't impulsive. It wasn't some emotional mistake. It was premeditated. Planned. Unapologetic. Liam sat motionless, his hands hovering over the keyboard. He expected to feel rage, to lash out, to smash something. But instead, he felt something sharper, something more precise. Vindication. She had shown him exactly who she was. And now, it was time for her to learn exactly who he had become. As he scrolled further, one final message caught his eye, one that shattered any lingering doubt. Emma, he's so clueless. I could disappear for days, and he probably wouldn't notice. Ryan, you should just leave him already. Emma, why would I do that? I'd lose the house, the money, everything. No, thanks. Liam leaned back in his chair, staring at the words on the screen. The sheer audacity of her message hit him harder than he expected. She wasn't just being unfaithful, she was using him, deliberately, unapologetically. To Emma, he was nothing more than a walking bank account, a convenience she had no intention of giving up. He closed the laptop with a quiet click, exhaling slowly into the silence of the room. The betrayal sat heavy on his chest, but this time, it wasn't crushing him, it was crystallizing something inside him. The puzzle pieces had all fallen into place, and the truth was glaringly obvious. Emma didn't just lack love for him, she lacked respect, empathy, and any shred of loyalty. And that was all the clarity Liam needed. The shock faded, replaced by a cool, simmering determination. He wasn't going to confront her yet. No, this required planning. Strategy. Emma's messages had made one thing clear, she valued convenience above all else. And if she couldn't appreciate what he had provided, he would take it all away, one calculated step at a time. Standing up, he felt an eerie sense of calm settle over him. Emma had been playing games with his trust for years, but she had made one crucial mistake, she had underestimated him. She thought he was predictable, easy to manipulate. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. For Liam, the evidence wasn't just a confirmation of her betrayal, it was the fuel he needed to take his life back. The weight of Emma's deceit lingered in Liam's chest, but instead of drowning him in despair, it ignited something deeper. He had spent years giving her his trust, his time, his love, only to be met with cold indifference and betrayal. The messages had erased any possibility of reconciliation. Now, there was only one path forward. He would leave. But not before ensuring she felt the full weight of her choices. His first move was simple. The joint bank account they shared had always been funded primarily by him, paying for the mortgage, utilities, and all their shared expenses. Emma had never concerned herself with the details. She simply enjoyed the comforts he provided, assuming they would always be there. Sitting at his laptop late that night, Liam logged into their online banking portal. With quiet precision, he transferred the bulk of the funds into his personal account. He left just enough in the joint account to avoid immediate suspicion. Emma rarely checked it, and the remaining balance would be enough to cover small automatic deductions until he was long gone. When the transfer confirmation popped up on the screen, Liam felt something he hadn't in years: liberation. For so long, he had been financing Emma's lifestyle, her comfort, her stability. But tonight? Tonight, he took it back. The next step was more personal. More painful. But necessary. Emma had built an image of herself, polished, sophisticated, respectable. Her social circle adored her, seeing only what she wanted them to see. But Liam knew the truth. And now, it was time for others to see it too. With methodical precision, he compiled the damning messages between Emma and Ryan into a neatly organized file. Screenshots, timestamps, irrefutable proof of her deception. At first, he considered sending the evidence anonymously. But no, his name needed to be on it. There could be no confusion. No ambiguity. That evening, Liam crafted a message. It was simple. Direct. Unapologetic. I regret to inform you that Emma has not been honest about her commitments in our marriage. Attached are messages that provide context. I thought you should know the truth. Liam. He read it over once, twice. Then, with steady fingers, he hit send. Emma had played her game. Now, it was his turn. Hitting send brought a strange mix of catharsis and finality. This wasn't about revenge, not in the petty sense, it was about accountability. Emma had spent years weaving her web of lies, believing there would never be consequences. Now, for the first time, she would have to face them. Liam knew how much she had relied on him, not just emotionally, but practically. He had handled everything, the utilities, the internet, even the subscriptions she used daily without a second thought. She never once had to lift a finger to maintain the life she so effortlessly enjoyed. And now? Now she would learn just how much of her comfort had been built on his quiet, unseen efforts. Over the next few days, Liam made his way through the list. One by one, he contacted each service provider. Electricity. Water. Internet, Emma's digital lifeline to both work and entertainment. He cancelled every account under his name, ensuring that by the time he was gone, they would be too. When the customer service representative asked if he wanted to transfer the accounts to another person, Liam didn't hesitate. No, he said, his voice even, detached. Cancel them outright. There was no spite in his tone, but inside, he felt a grim satisfaction. Emma had always assumed these things would take care of themselves. She was about to find out exactly how much of her so-called stability had been built on the foundation he had provided. The final piece of his plan required careful execution. This wasn't just about walking away, it was about protecting what was rightfully his. Liam met with a lawyer, ensuring that every step he took was deliberate, legally sound, and airtight. The house was in both their names, but Liam had financed nearly all of it. His lawyer assured him that he had a strong case for reclaiming his share of the assets. He also filed for divorce, setting the legal process in motion quietly, efficiently. The lawyer advised him to act quickly and document everything, advice Liam had already followed to the letter. Through it all, Emma remained blissfully unaware. Her days continued as they always had, texting Ryan, lounging in the home Liam had built, scrolling through social media without a care in the world. She hadn't noticed the dwindling funds in their account. She hadn't seen the pending cancellations for the utilities. And she certainly had no clue about the legal storm that was about to hit. Her obliviousness only reinforced Liam's resolve. The night before his departure, Liam wrote one final message. He kept it short. Honest. Unapologetic. Emma. I've spent years giving you love, respect, and stability. You've given me betrayal and indifference. I hope you enjoy the life you've built for yourself, because I'm done being part of it. Goodbye. Liam. He placed the note on the kitchen counter, a quiet but undeniable declaration of the end. As Liam packed his bags and stepped out of the house for the last time, a wave of calm washed over him. This wasn't fueled by anger anymore. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about reclaiming himself. He had given Emma everything. Now, he was taking back what was his. By the time she woke up, she would find herself alone in a dark, silent house, no power, no internet, no safety net. For the first time, she would be forced to confront the consequences of her actions. For Liam, this wasn't just an exit. It was the start of something new. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that felt heavy yet freeing all at once. Liam moved through it with quiet efficiency, packing only what he needed. Clothes. A few personal items. His laptop. Everything else, he left behind. The things in this house no longer felt like his. They were relics of a life he had poured himself into, a life Emma had rendered meaningless. As he zipped up his final bag, he took one last look around. The furniture they had picked out together, the framed photos from their early years, it all felt like a distant echo, a reminder of something that had died long before tonight. Once, this place had been filled with laughter, warmth, and hope. Now, it was nothing more than an empty shell. Much like their marriage. Liam exhaled, a mix of sadness and resolve settling over him. This was the closing of one chapter. But it was also the beginning of something new, something better. For the first time in years, he wasn't a shadow in someone else's life. He was stepping into his own. Liam picked up the note he had written earlier, reading it one last time. Short, but heavy with meaning. Every word had been chosen with care, not for revenge, not for anger, but for closure. For clarity. He walked to the kitchen and placed it on the counter, right where she would see it. A final message in the home they had once shared. Emma. Thank you for teaching me a valuable lesson. I deserve a better life, one where I'm not just a background character. You've shown me what stability means to you, and now I hope you enjoy it fully on your own. Goodbye. Liam. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't forgiving. It was just the truth. Liam ran his fingers over the paper's edge, ensuring it conveyed everything he felt, gratitude for the lesson learned, the resolve to move on, and a quiet acknowledgement of her indifference. Then, he took one last walk through the house. His footsteps were soft, each room filled with memories that felt more like ghosts. The living room, once a space of shared laughter, now sat cold and lifeless. The kitchen, where they had spent years eating meals together, was nothing more than a monument to their growing distance. By the time he reached the front door, Liam took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then, with quiet resolve, he stepped out and pulled the door shut behind him. The click of the lock was the final punctuation mark on a story that had ended long before tonight. He didn't look back. For the first time in years, he was moving forward, toward freedom, toward a life where he could finally be seen. Days passed. Liam was gone, but Emma hardly noticed. Her days went on as they always had, scrolling through social media, texting Ryan, sipping her morning coffee without a care. The house was quieter than usual, but that wasn't anything new. If anything, she welcomed it. To her, Liam had always been distant, brooding, probably sulking somewhere over something insignificant. She never checked the joint account. Never questioned why she hadn't seen him much. If he wasn't home, he was at work. If he wasn't at work, he was probably off somewhere, stewing in silence. It never even crossed her mind that he might have left. One evening, stretched out on the couch, her phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. Their conversation was playful, effortless, his flirtation feeding her ego. She smirked, tapping out a teasing reply, completely oblivious to the fact that Liam had already disappeared from her life. Occasionally, she noticed small things, his shoes missing from the hallway, his laptop no longer sitting on the kitchen counter. But the thought was fleeting, dismissed as quickly as it came. He's probably just reorganizing or something, she muttered, brushing it off. A week passed. The silence lingered. And still, Emma didn't see it. Her own indifference had shielded her from the truth. Liam, the man she had so easily dismissed, was gone. And she was too wrapped up in her own world to even realize it. until the cracks in her stability became impossible to ignore. Emma sat at the bank counter, her manicured nails drumming impatiently against the polished surface. She had stopped by to check on a declined payment for an online shopping spree, assuming it was just a temporary glitch. The teller, a young man with a polite but hesitant expression, tapped away at his keyboard. Then, after a long pause, he glanced up at her, his expression shifting to something almost sympathetic. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "your joint account shows a remaining balance of $752. Emma blinked. The words didn't register at first. "What?" she scoffed, shaking her head. "That's not possible. There must be a mistake." The teller gave an apologetic nod. "The account has had several withdrawals over the past few days. The current balance is $752. Emma's stomach twisted. A flicker of unease crept up her spine, but she shoved it down. No. No, this couldn't be happening. She pulled out her phone, quickly tapping into the banking app. Her breath caught as the numbers stared back at her. The money was gone. Everything she had taken for granted, her stability, her comfort, the life she had so effortlessly enjoyed, was slipping through her fingers. And for the first time in years, she finally noticed Liam's absence. Emma stared at the screen, her mind scrambling to make sense of the number in front of her. This can't be right. She blinked, her breath quickening. What? No, that's impossible, she snapped, leaning forward. Check again. There's no way it's that low. The teller remained calm, his fingers gliding over the keyboard. It appears there were multiple large withdrawals made earlier this week. He glanced up. Were you aware of these transactions? Her pulse pounded in her ears. No, I wasn't. Her voice sharpened with panic. What kind of bank just let someone drain an account without notifying me? A few customers nearby turned their heads at her outburst, but Emma didn't care. The teller exhaled slowly, his tone patient but firm. Ma'am, the withdrawals were made by the primary account holder. That person has full authorization over the funds. The realization hit her like a freight train. Liam. She gritted her teeth, shoving her chair back as she shot to her feet. Unbelievable, she hissed under her breath. Snatching her purse, she stormed out of the bank, her thoughts spiraling. For the first time, the cracks in her so-called stability began to show. The day went from bad to worse when her phone vibrated with a flood of notifications. At first, she assumed it was Ryan, but the previews flashing across the screen sent a chill through her. Mom, Emma, what is this? How could you do this to Liam? Claire, I can't believe you'd betray him like that. Don't ever ask me for anything again. Her stomach twisted as she scrolled, finding dozens of similar messages, each more scathing than the last. What the hell is going on? Her fingers trembled as she tapped one open. A screenshot loaded instantly, a transcript of her private conversations with Ryan. Every single word. The mockery of Liam. The casual cruelty. The callous admissions of using him. The flirtatious exchanges. All of it, laid bare for her family and friends to see. Emma's phone slipped from her grasp, clattering onto the pavement. How did he get these? Her breath hitched as a realization set in, Liam had been planning this. He had seen everything. And worse, he had made sure everyone else did, too. Panic surged through her as she fumbled to dial her mother's number. The call barely rang once before it was answered. How could you do this? Her mother's voice was sharp, thick with disappointment. Mom, it's not what it looks like, Emma blurted out, already searching for a way to twist the narrative. But her mother wasn't having it. Don't you dare lie to me, Emma, she snapped. We've all seen the messages. You've embarrassed yourself. You've disgraced this family. The line went dead. Emma stood frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, the dial tone humming in the silence. Over the next few hours, the full scope of her humiliation unfolded like a slow-motion disaster. Friends stopped responding. Texts went unanswered. Calls were ignored. Even Ryan, the one person she expected to stand by her, had gone silent. The social circle she had carefully curated was collapsing, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The next morning, Emma woke up to an eerie quiet. Her head ached from restless sleep, and the air in the house felt heavier than usual. Flipping the light switch, she frowned when nothing happened. Weird. With a groggy sigh, she wandered into the kitchen, flipping another switch. Still nothing. Power outage? Annoyed, she grabbed her phone and tapped the Wi-Fi icon, only to find it unresponsive. The internet was out, too. She scowled. What the hell is going on? Before she could make a call, a notification buzzed on her screen. She glanced down at the email preview. Final notice: water service terminated due to non-payment. A slow, creeping horror settled over her. She swiped open her emails, fingers moving frantically as she scanned the messages. Final notice. Service disconnection. Payment overdue. Electricity. Water. Internet. All shut off. The realization struck hard and fast: this wasn't some random mistake. This was Liam. She rushed to the counter, flipping through the pile of unopened mail. A pattern emerged instantly: late notices, overdue payments, warning after warning. All addressed to Liam. She had never thought to check. Never considered the possibility that her stability was anything but permanent. And now, with no power, no water, and no money left in their joint account, Emma finally understood. She didn't have a safety net anymore. For the first time, she was truly alone. By the afternoon, frustration had turned to desperation. Emma couldn't work without the internet, couldn't shower without water, and couldn't even charge her phone without electricity. Every convenience she had once taken for granted had been stripped away, leaving behind a stark and unforgiving reality: she had built her life on dependency. Sitting in the dim glow of the fading afternoon light, her anger began to dissolve, replaced by something unfamiliar. Regret. For the first time, she had to face the consequences of her choices. She had spent years clinging to stability, yet now, she had none. The control she once believed she had was an illusion, one Liam had quietly dismantled, piece by piece. And now? She was alone. The life she had once been so sure of, the comforts she had thought were permanent, were gone. Maybe for good. The house was silent, the kind of silence that pressed down on her like a weight. Emma sat curled up in the darkened living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hands. The battery was nearly dead, but she had one call left to make. Ryan. He was her last hope, the one person who had promised her something better. She had clung to his words, to the warmth of their stolen moments, believing he would be there when she needed him most. Surely, he wouldn't abandon her now. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. The ringing seemed to stretch on forever before he finally picked up. Emma? His voice was cautious, hesitant. What's going on? You've been blowing up my phone. Her relief was instant. I need you, she blurted out, her voice cracking. Liam's gone. He took everything, the money, the utilities. I don't know what to do. Silence. The pause dragged on long enough that Emma thought the call had disconnected. Then, finally, Ryan spoke. Emma. I don't think this is going to work. The words sent a chill through her. Her breath hitched. What? Ryan sighed, his tone flat. I mean, I didn't sign up for this. I've got my own life to worry about. You're in a mess, and I can't be the one to fix it. Emma sat upright, gripping the phone. Are you serious? She demanded, her voice rising. You said I was all you needed. You said we'd figure things out together. That was when things were different, he muttered. Back when you had things figured out. I can't afford to deal with this. Her chest tightened, panic setting in. So that's it? You're just going to walk away? A small, annoyed sigh came from the other end. Look, Emma. I'm sorry. But you're on your own. The line went dead. Emma sat frozen, staring at the screen, her mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. Ryan, her escape plan, her safety net, the person she had convinced herself would be there, was gone. Just like Liam. The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the floor. For the first time, the crushing weight of loneliness set in. There was no one left to turn to. No more carefully crafted illusions, no more distractions. Just an empty house and the echo of her own choices. Days passed before she finally worked up the courage to face Liam. She stood outside his new apartment, her palms damp with nerves. She had rehearsed this moment over and over in her head, but now that she was here, she wasn't sure what to say. She had hesitated for days, debating whether she even had the right to show up like this. But desperation had a way of overriding pride. The silence from him had been unbearable. With Ryan gone and her life in ruins, Liam was the only person she could think to turn to. Taking a shaky breath, she raised her hand and knocked. Moments later, the door opened. And there he was. Liam stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He looked different, lighter, almost as if something had lifted off his shoulders. He wasn't weighed down by anger or resentment. He wasn't the man she had left behind. For a brief second, Emma faltered. The words she had practiced so carefully melted away under his steady gaze. Liam, she finally managed, her voice trembling. I was wrong. I made so many mistakes, but we can fix this. Let's start over. Liam didn't answer right away. He leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed, considering her. The only sound between them was the faint hum of traffic in the distance. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. Controlled. Emma, he said, tilting his head slightly. Why are you really here? Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she clasped her hands together, desperation clinging to every word. Because I need you, she whispered. I was stupid, selfish, and blind. I know that now. I'm ready to change. Please, Liam. Liam shook his head, an almost pitying smile tugging at his lips. No, Emma. You're not here because you suddenly realized my worth. You're here because your life fell apart, and now you're scrambling to piece it back together. She opened her mouth to protest, but the words caught in her throat. That's not true, she said weakly, though even she didn't believe it. I love you. Liam's smile faded. His expression hardened into something resolute. No, Emma, he said quietly. You don't love me. You never did. If you did, you wouldn't have treated me like an afterthought, like a paycheck, a convenience. You're not sorry for hurting me. You're just sorry you lost the life I gave you. Her shoulders trembled, her carefully rehearsed plea unraveling in the face of his unwavering resolve. Please, she choked out. Don't do this. Don't throw everything away. Liam exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Everything was already gone long before I walked out, he said, his voice steady, almost detached. You made your choices, and now you're living with them. Good luck finding that stability you value so much. And with that, he closed the door. Emma stood frozen on the doorstep, staring at the closed entrance as if willing it to reopen. But it didn't. The finality of his words crashed over her like a storm, leaving her adrift in a sea of regret. For the first time, she truly understood. She had lost him. and there was no getting him back. Emma sat alone in a cramped studio apartment, a far cry from the spacious home she once shared with Liam. Gone were the elegant furnishings, the curated decor, the comfortable life she had taken for granted. In their place sat a second-hand couch with sagging cushions, a scratched-up table cluttered with unopened bills, and a flickering thrift store lamp that barely illuminated the space. She already knew what the notices said. Final warning. Overdue balance. Disconnection notice. Words that had once meant nothing to her now dictated her reality. The stability she had so proudly valued had vanished, and in its absence, only regret remained. Her gaze drifted to a dusty photo frame resting on the windowsill. It was from their 3rd anniversary, Liam, smiling warmly, his hand wrapped around hers. Emma traced his face with her fingertip, her chest tightening. She had mocked his love, belittled his devotion, and dismissed his efforts. Now, for the first time, she saw the truth: Liam had never been the problem. She had. A single tear slipped down her cheek as she set the frame back down, its glass now clouded with dust. The silence of the apartment pressed in on her, suffocating and absolute. She thought about calling someone, anyone, but her phone remained silent. Her friends had distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with someone branded a cheater. Her family, ashamed and disappointed, barely spoke to her. Even Ryan, the man she had risked everything for, was long gone. With no internet, no distractions, and no one left to turn to, she was truly alone. Her world had shrunk to the size of this tiny apartment. And for the first time in her life, there was no one left to blame. Emma had built her life on convenience and appearances. Now, she had neither. Liam's life had become something he never could have imagined during those years of quiet suffering. Now, he stood on a sun-kissed beach, the rhythmic crash of the waves a soundtrack to his new reality. A camera rested comfortably on his shoulder, his fingers adjusting the lens as he captured the golden hues of a setting sun. Photography, his long-lost passion, had found its way back into his life, filling his days with purpose and creativity. No longer tethered to a life of emotional neglect, he was free to embrace the things that made him feel alive. Beside him stood Chloe, a woman whose presence was warm and effortless. She was kind, empathetic, and genuine, everything Emma had never been. She didn't love him for what he could provide, she loved him for who he was. Their connection was quiet yet undeniable, an understanding that didn't require words. As they scrolled through the photos together, Chloe's laughter rang out, light and full of life. Liam turned to her, his face breaking into a smile that wasn't forced or weary, it was real. The kind of smile that came from deep, unshaken contentment. The past no longer weighed on him. It had been replaced by something lighter, something promising. For the first time in his life, Liam wasn't surviving. He was thriving. In the evenings, Liam poured himself into something else, a memoir. It wasn't a book about bitterness or revenge, but about transformation. About resilience. The pages chronicled his journey, not just from betrayal but through it. Each word was a reflection of how far he had come, a testament to the strength he had found within himself. One day, across the city, Emma's world stood still. Mindlessly scrolling through her phone, she paused at a photo that stopped her cold. It was Liam. Standing against a backdrop of sunlit waves, he was laughing, his arm around Chloe. His eyes, once dulled by exhaustion and disappointment, sparkled with a joy she had never seen before. A joy that had nothing to do with her. Emma's chest tightened as an unfamiliar ache settled deep inside her. She had spent so long assuming Liam would always be there, always orbiting her life, waiting for the scraps of affection she barely offered. But he wasn't waiting anymore. He had moved on. He had rebuilt. And she had nothing but the remnants of a life she had once taken for granted. "I was wrong," she whispered, the words barely audible against the silence of her empty apartment. But there was no one left to hear them. She had spent years believing that stability meant security, comfort, control. But now she understood, too late, that real stability wasn't found in money or convenience. It was found in love. In respect. In the quiet, unwavering connection that Liam had once given her so freely. And he had found all of those things. Just not with her. Liam's memoir neared completion, and as he reflected on everything that had led him here, he wrote one final thought. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about hurting the other person. It's about finding happiness they can't touch and letting them see what they lost. As Liam's world continued to flourish, Emma's remained stagnant, a stark reminder of what happens when you take someone for granted. In the end, their stories had split into two entirely different paths. One a journey of renewal, love, and self-discovery. The other, a lesson in the cost of indifference.